Hello, friends. My name is Steve, and welcome to the Friday Conversation. Here are some friends. We'll go around the room and say hello to everyone. Anthony, will you start us off for real this time?
Hello, yes. My name's Tony Mr. Selfie. I have a YouTube channel called Horrible where I do a few horror gaming shows and a few sort of movie reviews, but not to the level of the Critical Drinker, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Chris.
Yeah, name's Chris Mohan. Sometimes YouTuber, sometimes, some would say mostly appear on other people's channels, just talking shit and whatever.
And Will.
Hi there. I'm Will Jordan. My alter ego is the Critical Drinker. I've been known to review movies and have a few drinks. I'm also the author of the Ryan Drake book series.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem.
We know you're busy. So, Anthony, the floor is yours, sir.
Oh, wow. So I had a few questions, Will, with regards to the actual kind of conception of the Ryan Drake series. I know, like, for example, you've just essentially put together like this Kickstarter for the filming, and the filming is kind of wrapped, from what I imagine. But like, can you kind of bring us back, like, to the very beginning, the genesis of how the character began and how you yourself had the seed of idea for him?
Yeah, I mean, it always stemmed from my interest in the idea of adventure and like taking your characters off to far-flung places and just doing interesting things with them. And for me, like as a teenager and stuff, I was always reading like fantasy novels, sci-fi stories, like just things that took you off to far-off lands and stuff. And I wanted to bring that forward into the writing that I did, I suppose, when I became like an author myself. And I was always entranced by the idea of like these people fighting wars behind the scenes, like the espionage, the spying, the covert operations and stuff. So I thought, well, okay, let's marry those two things together and have like a character who gets to go on all these crazy missions all around the world. It's like James Bond, but a bit more grounded and a bit more sort of militaristic. And that was sort of the genesis of the Ryan Drake character. And I thought, well, how can I make him interesting? Start off with like, where's he from? Well, okay, let's make him British, but like let's throw him in amongst a bunch of Americans, because you can have like these characters sparking off each other. They're from different cultures, different backgrounds. They even communicate differently. And then his job by its nature allows him to go to war zones or urban environments. Like he might be spying, he might be like in the middle of a conflict. You can essentially have him do anything you want. And so that was the beginning of his character. And then I didn't want the series to just be like an adventure of the week kind of thing, where every novel is just its own standalone story. I wanted an overarching narrative that would tie it all together. And that's where the character of Anya was born. She's the character who has got this big backstory that influences the events throughout the series, and gradually Ryan Drake discovers more about her, and they've got this very complex relationship, sort of a love-hate, love a bit more relationship. So that gave me a lot of things to work with as an author. Sorry, I know that's a very long-winded answer to this.
No, not at all. What were your inspirations like growing up as such? Like when day one, would you say like Lee Child and Tom Clancy were up there, or?
I mean, I think, when I go on holidays, like I'll read books like it could be like Clive Cussler, like adventure stories, like proper like trashy, just airport novels, or a bit of Lee Child, the Jack Reacher novels, the Tom Clancy, the techno thrillers, things like that is what always appealed to me.
I mean, I kind of read most recently your Dark Harvest book, which is a bit of a step away as such, but also it kind of for me was like the kind of X-Files, but then with the kind of like that military style thing, which I really liked. With the kind of the Datlov Parser, I always fuck that up. Datlov, that's one. How much research did you have to do into that before you could actually sort of sit down and start writing it? Or was it always something that was in your mind that you thought, this is a bit of a mysterious kind of unsolved mystery, I'd love to kind of delve into that a little bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I knew a bit about it already, so it was enough for me to write the synopsis of the story. And then when it came to actually write those scenes where they're doing it, yeah, I wanted to get as much accurate information as I could. Like when it came to the makeup of the team, like what everyone, something as simple as like their ages, their backgrounds, like how they might interact with each other, and the sort of route that they took up the mountains, the problems that they encountered along the way. I wanted to be as accurate as I could with that, and try and weave that into the fictional narrative that I created. So it's like I know obviously, or we know historically how they set out. We know how they ended up. We know like what the team was composed of, what the people were like. How can I then concoct a reasonable, or at least a scenario that encapsulates all that stuff. So it was really fun researching it. Actually, like it's just it's a cool little thing to take a real historical event and try and weave a fictional narrative into it without messing with it too much.
Was there a case where you had like a board of like 3, 4, 5 possibilities that you could have went down in that case when you're trying to like fill in the blanks and trying to see whether it worked?
I think like the way I write novels is I sit down, write a detailed synopsis of it. So it's less about like having like big conspiracy board walls and stuff with corkboard, and more just me writing a nice fleshed out narrative that I know will work, because I know some people will just fly by the seat of their pants and just like start writing the novel and just see where it goes. I'm the exact opposite. I like to know what the structure of my story is, and I like to work out all the problems as much as I can in advance. It's never 100%. Like there's always times when I get to a certain point in the story and just think, this fucking sucks, man. I need to change something here.
I'm writing myself down a road here.
It'd be like filming a movie, right? And there might be things that like seem perfectly fine on the script, but when an actor has to actually say it, they're like, no, this is stupid. And then you have to tweak it a bit. But it goes with the territory, I suppose. And yeah, it was a fun book to write because I sort of almost needed a break from Ryan Drake. After 10 years of that and 9 novels and a couple of novellas, I just wanted to do something with new characters for a change. So it was a nice little holiday.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question as well. Like, what is your kind of like writing scheme? Do you have a kind of rota? Do you have like a kind of, right, from 8 till this time I'm doing this? And do you have a kind of set out thing? Or do you just go like, you know what, I'm in the mood for writing today. I could be here for like 6 hours or whatnot. But
I got to the point, like initially I was a bit more laid back about it because I didn't have YouTube when I started my Ryan Drake series. The channel wasn't really a thing back then, and so I could just concentrate on that. But I also had like a day job to work, and so it was very much in the evenings. And for me, I know people are different, but I need to keep the momentum going when I'm writing a book. I can't like leave it for like a week or something and then come back to it because it takes me ages to get the momentum going again. So I had to just keep it going as much as possible every night, get like 5 or 10 pages done, and just really feel like I was making progress. And so it just comes down to discipline and motivation, because you've probably all been there. Like there's times when you just think, I cannot be arsed tonight. Like I'm tired and I just don't have the motivation to write or to sit in front of a computer and type away. But you know that if you don't do it, that's a whole night wasted, and it's just adding more time onto the project ultimately. So.
And when Tatiana calls from the club, what are you going to do, right?
That's it. It's a tough call to make, but sometimes you got to say no. Get back in your cage. I kid you not, though, there was one point where, and this isn't a Tatiana story, but I was. My YouTube channel had just taken off, so I was like, I was doing really well, and so there was a real pressure to keep making videos so they would keep growing. But I hadn't yet left my job, so I was working a full-time job, and I was making YouTube videos, and I was trying to finish off the final novel in the Ryan Drake series, and so that was tough. That was the genuine point in my life where I said, I'm taking on too much here, and I don't have enough hours in the day. I mean, it was all great stuff because it's like, I'm in a fortunate position where I've got a relatively successful YouTube channel that people want to see. I've got a job that's paying the bills, and I've also got this writing career, which I've been lucky enough to write 9 books in this series. A lot of people never get that chance, So it's all good stuff, but like, yeah, there's only so much of that good stuff you can handle before you burn out. So I'm glad I was able to drop some of that.
How do you avoid burnout with YouTube being so time consuming?
I mean, I'm lucky in the sense that it's kind of fun. You know, we're allowed to have a bit of fun doing this stuff. Like, ultimately, I get to talk about films, so like I enjoy that. I enjoy storytelling. I always have, and so every new video that I make, every new movie that I review, it's another little puzzle that you have to unravel. I suppose it's a little intellectual challenge of, you know, how do I get to the core of what this film is that I want to talk about, what works, what doesn't, and how can I present this in a fun way that'll, like, you know, give people a bit of entertainment at the same time. So it's not got to that point where it's boring me yet. I still enjoy doing it, so I'm very lucky in that respect. But yeah, I know for some people it is a grind, and it is something that they have to work through.
But it sounds like you are taking the thing of making a YouTube video and making it a storytelling thing rather than necessarily I am looking at metrics of popular videos around a certain time and I've got to fit whatever the popular thing is at the moment that a lot of people seem to do.
Yeah, I mean, like, man, I'm lucky in that, you know, my channel's grown to the point where I can indulge myself a little bit and I can just talk about the things that I find personally interesting. And yeah, there's sometimes when I make a video and I know it's not going to do as well as other ones, and that's fine. Like, I can look at that because, like I say, I'm in that fortunate position. Other people are not, and like maybe they have to just constantly chase the algorithm. That's why you get commentary channels that, like, I don't know, for example, when the stuff around Snow White blew up with Rachel Zegler getting, you know, caught saying like unfortunate stuff on various interviews, there'll be channels that would produce just video after video after video about stuff about her because it would just get them views, and that was the chasing of the algorithm. And I just, like, I don't really have to do that so much, so I'm kind of lucky there. Yeah, and it means I can you know, keep myself varied, I suppose. You know, I don't have to just say be constantly making videos about how you know, Marvel is falling apart, or, you know, woke cinema is terrible and stuff, because I can make positive videos praising movies that I enjoy, because it's good for my morale. Because if I was just making constantly negative videos, it might get me more views, but man, it would leave me pretty depressed.
But I think that's what it is, though, in terms of like I can see you're wearing a Top Gun T-shirt there, sort of thing, and like your review for Maverick was like I still, like, to this day, if I just want to have like myself a little pep, I just put on YouTube that kind of scene where he just teaches the rookies when he goes through the canyon. It just makes me feel good, you know. It was one of those films.
Movies are allowed to do that. Movies are supposed to do
exactly.
that.
That's the whole point. Mm-hmm. And that was one of my best films of. Was that last year?
It
or
was,
the year before?
Yeah.
Last year, yeah. It was just, it was so. I mean, you've talked about on your channel as being the critical drinker, as, like, you know, taking old IPs and taking these old, like, you know, well, heroes from, I would say, I'm collectively saying for us, for our youth, maybe, and turning them into like cantankerous old men that, you know, are just basically one whiskey shot away from ending it all, kind of thing. And it's like, sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes you get the kind of Maverick character who's like, you know what, he's still doing what he loves. He's up there in the air still. Yeah, he's, you know, pushing boundaries and like. But why can't we kind of go down that route? Whereas it seems to have, in the last sort of 5 years, just gone down this road of having these old men that are just like.
I think it's a desire. Well, one, it's born from the attitude of the youth towards older generations of like, well, of course you must be depressed because you're older than me. You know, like, you know, what? You're over 40? Like, your life is over practically. Why are you even still alive? And partly it's the belief that you know better than other people. Like, you know, well, older generations, of course, they're more primitive. Like, they have to deal with like a less enlightened time and stuff. And partly it's this desire to deconstruct what came before, because, you know, there's a sort of like intangible acknowledgement that maybe they're not so good at creating new things, and so you're not going to be able to compete with what was created before. So rather than make something better, it's easier to just break down and trying to paint the achievements of previous generations as being not as good as you thought they were. That's why you got Luke Skywalker, who's suddenly just a sad old man who wants to die, you know. Because if you had him at his full potential, a character like Rey from Star Wars is just going to look like some sad cardboard cutout, you know, with nothing to her. So it's all of those things combined. But yeah, like I joked on Open Bar once, it's like I want to introduce these writers to like some happy old people who are just like, you know, like they've lived a full life, they've got lots of wisdom now, they've got grandchildren, they're content with where they're at, and they've achieved a great deal. Like that's almost what they need to see, because like being older doesn't necessarily mean you give up on everything and you become a useless loser. Maybe you have some hard-won wisdom and lessons that you've learned through your experiences that you can pass on. That's why, yeah, probably why Top Gun Maverick did so well. It was that one of those rare movies that said, hey, this older generation, maybe they can still kick ass when they need to, and maybe it might be worth listening to them once in a while.
These old dogs can still show you a trick or two, yeah.
Pretty much, yeah. And it appeals, well, it certainly appeals to an audience of a certain demographic. Like if you've got guys in their 40s and 50s, they don't want to be told that they're useless and pathetic now because they're a little bit older. Like they want to believe that they can still kick ass if they had to, if it came down to it. So it's like it pleases everyone, really. It's not hard, but it's like they just refuse to do it most of the time.
I've been a geek most of my life. My days, I never had days of kicking ass. That was never a thing.
But you have learned things in your time.
Oh yes, for sure.
So yeah. There's that.
But you do find as well in films, as much as in fashion and like in anything else in life, there seems to be like a kind of 10-year cycle. So we had the kind of, you know, the 80s with the kind of Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, those type of films. That kind of died a death into the 90s, became like indie filmmaking, a bit more grungy. That kind of then led into the superhero kind of thing that we have now, which is now, you've talked about superhero fatigue, which I do think is a thing, and I think it's kind of maybe a couple of years gone by that now. Do you think we're going to have another resurgence of, like, we saw Reachers coming into Series 2, I think, in December, and I do want to ask you about, once again, the Kickstarter sort of thing that you've been getting on and how you've been doing with that. But, like, how do you feel... Do you feel there is this kind of resurgence now with everything going on politically, societally sort of thing, that there is this kind of resurgence of the man coming back and, like, you know, kicking down the arse and taking names and all out of bubblegum?
Well, I mean, it's almost that kind of attitude is almost counterculture now, because the prevailing culture is that men just need to like know their place and move aside and make way for people who are more diverse and stuff. And, you know, you can only tell them that for so long before the fuck you factor kicks in, and they just go, oh, piss off. Like, I'm done being told that I'm broken or that I'm the source of all the world's problems and stuff. Like, and that eventually just results in a kind of backlash. And I think we're seeing that more and more. It's quite rare that major studios actually acknowledge that, because it goes against their prevailing wisdom. But you do get little things that creep out, like, like you said, the Reacher TV show, movies like Extraction with Chris Hemsworth, Sisu, like that Finnish movie, where it's just like, yeah, we have got kick-ass male heroes who are not, they're not weak. They don't need to be deconstructed. They don't need to be like outdone by a stronger, better female like replacement, because they recognize like we're making a movie for guys, by and large, and that's what they want to see, a heroic male character. You can have movies for women as well, for sure. You can have your Barbie or whatever garbage you want to churn out, but yeah, like just let them have their thing and let us have our thing. What's so bad about that? And when it does happen, it works really well. I think you're going to see that, and you're going to see more adaptations of video games. I think it's finally time for them. It's been bubbling away for a long time. I think games have been moving closer and closer to what movies are anyway, in terms of their storytelling, their cinematic presentation. And so it's an easy leap now to jump over, because they've proven it can be done. You know, the Mario movie, one of the biggest box office events of the year. The Last of Us TV show, you know, one of the most well-regarded TV shows of the year. So I think it's time for that as well, So it's going to be an interesting two-pronged attack, really. But I think one way or another, superhero movies are on the way out. We're all done with it. It's played out as a genre.
Yeah, it's funny how superhero movies had broad appeal because they were the comic books of our generation, so we had already bought into it by the time they came out. And when you're talking about video games, you're talking about a medium that is predominantly teen and young adult. You know, as society sees it, obviously a lot of us gamed for a long time, but they'll buy into it because of the original medium there as well. So it's actually coming from the other direction as far as creating a big enough audience to go see anything in the cinema at that stage, like the Marvel movies.
Well, I think now you're seeing a generation that has, how can I put this? Like, the generation that we belong to probably came up in the 90s when the PlayStation was and the Nintendo 64 and stuff were the big thing. Like, really the beginning of the current era of video gaming. And so you now do have gamers who are in their late 30s, their 40s, who were around to see all of that, and they've stuck with it. And so, you know, you've got a pretty broad demographic, and in terms of like the actual market value of video games as an industry, it dwarfs Hollywood, absolutely dwarfs it. And so if you can capitalize on that market, my God, you will rake in the money.
I just want a really good Resident Evil film. That's all I'm asking
I know,
for.
so do I. I've been waiting 25 years for one. I've never had one.
The first one now to me is like a bit of a kind of guilty pleasure because it's not actually that bad, but it's like I just want a really good Resident Evil film.
Yeah, just one that's
it's
like
just got a
properly
really cool
lore
scene.
accurate. Like even if it involves like guys in SWAT team uniforms poking around a spooky old mansion out in the woods, like that's okay. That's like in line with the first game.
Even
so
if they took George A. Romero's original script, then I mean that's got some weird things going on with it, but I'd still damn well like to see it.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I sort of do want but don't want a BioShock, a properly good BioShock make, because it's sort of, I want people to experience actually, because the storytelling medium and that is what makes it so powerful insofar as you kind of follow on rails and that kind of stuff, but also that is a great
could
story.
you see that more as a series though? I could see that as a
filmed.
series. I could see that as a
I could.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do it both ways, but that world's phenomenal.
From a visual standpoint, imagine how incredible the underwater city would look. Rapture, like that Art Deco style. I love that visual aesthetic, and like having characters like Andrew Ryan and everything he represents. Like, I don't know how well it would play with modern day sensibilities in Hollywood politically, but it'd be fantastic to watch.
When now that you're known to be a critic and you know obviously you break down film and you break down storytelling, when you're writing, do you ever second guess yourself or think that people spend extra attention because of how critical you've been of their material?
Yeah, a little bit. Not so much second guessing myself, but almost like, oh god, if I screw this one up, like people are actually gonna lambast me for this one because I'm so critical of other people, and so you can sometimes find yourself like, well, I need to build in an extra layer of double crossing or unexpected revelations or whatever, because like it's too predictable otherwise, and you can tie yourself in knots with it a little bit. But I was lucky enough that I'd been doing it for many years before my YouTube channel really took off, and so I was kind of experienced as an author by that point. So I think if it had happened right at the beginning of my writing career, it would have been a different story. I might have found myself really like struggling to find the right balance, but I've been doing it for quite a long time by then, so it wasn't too much of a problem.
Sorry, well, you mentioned that you wrote, you tend to write like maybe 5 to 10 pages. If that's like, do you kind of like, is it stream of consciousness on the page and then you kind of come back to edit, or do you kind of like write it all down and then go back at the very end and go through everything? Like, what's your process in the editing sort of way?
There's probably, like, for me, there's one editorial pass. Like, I go through the whole thing again once it's finished before I send it off to my my editor. So I will, as I'm writing it, I don't just write, just notes or kind of bullet points or anything. I write the entire novel as I want it to appear, and it might be that I go over the same scene like a few times to get it the way I want it, and then once I've got to the end, I've probably like made a few mental notes, like there's a few scenes here that I could probably tighten up or change around or something. And then I'll give it another pass, work all my way through it again, rewrite whatever I need to rewrite, and then that's usually where I'm happy enough to send it off to an editor, and they'll give me their thoughts and tell me all the things they want to cut out, and then I'll have a minor heart attack, and then get to it, you know. So yeah, that's generally my process. Like I don't like to spend too much time on it at an early stage, like going over it and over it and over it, because I think you can make yourself sick of your own work, which is really not where you want to be. And that the part of the reason why I plot it out so carefully before I start writing it is I really don't want to get to the midpoint of the book and then realize, oh shit, like this is all wrong, I need to change all of it and go back to the beginning, because that just kills your momentum and kills your enjoyment of the project. You know, because I don't know about you guys, like the editing phase is like the least enjoyable part for me. I like the pure creative part where I'm just telling the story. When I get down to the level of having to like edit individual sentences, it's just like being a secretary or something. It's not fun anymore.
I like an edit. It's my
Really?
it's my zone out time. When I've had just the crappiest day in work, sometimes the best, because you could just go to bed and just like fall asleep early or something. Like the editing process is engaging enough that you know you don't fall asleep, but it's also like sort of therapeutic, and you kind of take something big, shorten it down. I know that's a really unpopular view because most people absolutely hate it. But
No, is it like I've spoken to
know.
a few authors who are like this? It's like they really enjoy the editing part of it. It's just each person's different, their mind's slightly different, and I tell you the bit that always sticks with me is when you get to the final line edit stage, where it's like, because you usually get this ominous email from your editor or the line editor saying like, this is your last chance to make like any meaningful changes to the manuscript, and you're like, oh shit, I don't want to look back on this years from now and think, I wish I'd changed that, you know. So there is that. It gives you like a slight air of urgency, you know. I've got to get it just right or as best I can. But yeah, for me, no book is ever 100% perfect. It's never 100% finished. I could look back on any of my books and find like 100 things I would change now. But you have to get to a point where you just say, okay, that's enough. It's time to let it go.
Yeah, it's tough. If someone were to ask you, or if someone has asked you for advice on beginning their writing career, what advice would you give to them?
Oof, that's a big topic. Like in terms of writing the book, getting published, getting an editor, getting an agent.
Whatever the best advice you think would be for that person.
Well, I can only like talk about what works for me, and so like I say, each person is different. For me, plot it out in advance, because making that extra effort at the beginning will save you so much more effort later on when it comes to rewrites. Yeah, like I guess when it comes to your story, have an arc in mind for your characters. Like think about where you want each person to go. Like where do you want them to start off? Where do you want them to end up as a person? How do you want to get them there? How can you weave all that together into a cohesive story that involves everyone? And yeah, certainly when it comes to trying to get an agent, it's always a case of make your opening chapter the best work of your life, because that's probably the only part they're going to read before they think to sign you on. Yeah, like most of them, they read hundreds of manuscripts a month, and so you've got to get those first 10, 15 pages like proper top notch, because they might not even get beyond that. So yeah, I guess that would be my initial piece of advice for people.
I hear a lot of new authors get discouraged when they query and they get a lot of either no responses or no thank yous.
Yeah,
did you query that when you started out? Yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah. How did this begin? It was, like the first novel I ever wrote, didn't really get anywhere with it. I got just loads of form letters or emails rejecting it, and then one guy like was good enough to like personally respond to me and say like, you know, you're a good writer, but I don't think this genre that you're writing in is going to work for you, and so went back to the drawing board, and then tried again, and with my next book, that's what got me my agent. And so it was it was funny the way I did it because I wasn't even finished. Like, I hadn't finished the manuscript, but I thought, oh, it's going to take them ages to read it and respond. And so what I did was I sent the opening couple of chapters and my synopsis to a whole bunch of them, just did the shotgun approach, and thought, well, I've got like probably a month or so to finish up this book anyway. And then within a couple of days, like 2 of them got back and said, yeah, really like it. I'd like to see the rest of the manuscript, please. It's like, oh shit, I'm like weeks away from finishing. So I had to like lock myself in my office and just blasted out like, I don't know, about 100 pages in one weekend. I've never written so fast in my entire life. Went through a lot of caffeine that weekend, but it was enough to get it sent off, and that's what got me my agent, basically, that was there to represent me. So yeah, I mean, I've certainly had plenty of rejections, and I've said this before. I actually kept them on my my email. I printed them off, and I kept those rejection emails. And every so often, I would just take a look at them. If I was ever like feeling a bit unmotivated or pissed off or whatever, I would just look at them and be like, "Yep, you would absolutely kill to be in the position you're in now. Like 10 years ago, the past Will would have killed to be where you are now. So just remember that." And so that's usually enough to get me going again. You know.
Anthony's done a lot of rejections.
I've heard horror stories. Like, I've been to crime writing festivals where people have talked about like 10 years of failures and stuff before they got their first publishing deal. And it's brutal, man, because to think of all that work, like months or even years of your life given over to writing all these manuscripts that will never get seen. They'll just be sitting on a folder somewhere on your hard drive. Like,
well, didn't even Stephen King himself say like he had a big kind of like pin in his wall, and he just basically the rejection slips were like stacking up, and then he had to get like a bigger pin because they were just so much. So just goes to show, like, you know, even the most famous kind of like writer of our time sort of thing maybe is had to deal with a lot of rejection. So
I mean, agents and publishers, they don't have a crystal ball. They don't know what's magically gonna sell and what isn't. Like, I remember like being at some events down in London talking to publishers, and they're like, to this day, none of us fucking understand why 50 Shades of Grey did so well. Like, it's absolute garbage. We all knew it was, but like people were just like they couldn't get enough of it. So we just went with it.
Didn't that start out as Twilight fan fiction? Isn't the
it did?
Yeah,
I believe it did. Yeah.
And then, bizarrely enough,
absolute insanity. But like, there's sometimes like anomalies like that just crop up. There's no explanation for it. It's just something catches on, and makes someone a multi-millionaire overnight.
And just to be clear, Anthony, when I said you've issued a lot of rejections, I meant for your short story, for your collections, is what I meant. Yeah, that's what I was talking. No, because you've been on the other end of it. I just wanted to because you've had to provide feedback
so
for people
I used to have an online website called Storgy, which we tried to promote independent fiction, and it just started off as just a few group of us like coming together, trying to hone the craft, trying to keep ourselves, creatively fluid in that respect. And we just found that a lot of people were coming back to us and saying like, hey, can we send you our story? And it was like, yeah, sure, of course. And when we first started the website, it was very like, just throwing anything that anyone gave to us because it was content in that respect. But then as we came on, the caliber kind of became really good, and it had to be the kind of case of having to now turn people down because we were like 3 months in advance already scheduled for because we did like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday when we had the short stories out. So then it got to the point of there were 3 of us in the group sort of thing, and we sort of alternated our roles, but I was mainly in charge of the short stories. And it got to a point where I was just like, I can have my preferences of genre and whatnot, but how do I sort of turn around and say this is bad or this is good? But they're all great. They're all fantastic. There might be something that's technically not great. There might be something that I didn't feel that I didn't get or something like that. So it came down to the point of I was like, I can't do this anymore because there is that rejection. Like, you do feel like a bastard turning around and having to send off that rejection sort of email saying, like, I'm sorry, you didn't get this because of this. And I would always try to sort of like give I've read the story. I don't want to give like you a blanket template email that I know a lot of people get in their rejections slips or whatever you want to call it. But I'd always like try to say, like, it didn't work because of this, it didn't work because of that. And that's my own personal preference. That doesn't mean to say that it's not a good story. And there was always that thing in the back of my head that always felt like I'm sending this thing out and I feel like I'm kind of just shooting a child in the head or something. There was always that kind of element of someone's dream. Exactly. So it got to the point where I was like, I couldn't do it anymore because it just felt too much in the respect of saying no. And I'm not saying like you can't say no to people. I'm just saying like, this is someone's work. This is like, they've maybe put their heart and soul into it. And a lot of people actually, it's really weird because you get people coming back with feedback. Like, they'd ask, like, so what didn't work? Da, 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 da. And I'll be like, if I have enough time, I'll come back and I'll say, well, for me personally, this didn't work for this, that, the other sort of thing. Other times you would get like, go fuck yourself kind of thing. And it's like, well, okay, no harm, no foul sort of thing. And then other times you just get like the kind of like nothing. And then what would happen is, and what I'd like to think would happen is then, like, a couple of months later, you get another entry by the same author, and you could see the kind of upscale of what they'd done, like, the kind of maybe, I'm not saying lessons that they learned from the feedback, but also the kind of just as they've grown as a writer themselves. So, yeah,
it's a difficult thing to deal with, like, emotionally and intellectually, because you question, like, well, okay, what aspect of what I was doing was wrong? Because I went through that even at the stage of having an agent. We submitted my first book to a bunch of publishers and went through that thing of like, we really like you, and if it had happened like a couple of months ago, we would have totally signed you up, but we've just signed someone else doing the exact same thing, so blah blah blah, it's not quite the right time, whatever. There was like a couple of them that we got right down to that final stage where it goes to like the final like board of approval, and like they said no, and that was a tough one to take, because it's like I came this close to getting that first book published and then being told no. And so I did the worst thing you can do, where I immediately rushed to my computer and started working on my next one without really planning it out, just thinking I need to get myself back to where I was there, and just came up with a bunch of crap ideas, sent it to my agent, probably ended up pissing her off eventually, because she almost got to the point of saying like, nah, I don't think this is working anymore, like I don't know what you want to do here, but like maybe you want to find a different agent. It's like, oh shit, what do I do? So that's when I took a step back, took a break for like a month or two, and that's came back with my idea for what would be Redemption, which was my first actual published work. So it is a tough one, because the worst thing you can do as a writer, I think, is to start writing what you think people want to read rather than the story you want to tell. Because then you just find yourself just trying to pander to something that might not even exist. And so, yeah, it took a little bit of fine-tuning, I suppose, to find what worked for me and what was going to ultimately work for everyone else as well. But it knocks your confidence. That's, I guess, the point.
But you have to enjoy writing it as well. Like, as you said, like, you can't write something that you can't appeal to the mass market sort of thing if you yourself don't enjoy writing it. You have to be there, and you're the one that's like, if you're invested in the characters, if you're invested in the story, then you want to see how it goes on. And like, I was funny enough, I was watching the Pennywise, the 90 series of It. Not the most recent. I was watching a documentary about that sort of thing, and they have these segments, these segues with Stephen King sort of thing, and he was like just basically saying about the fact that when he starts writing, he doesn't do plots. He just kind of starts writing things, and when the kind of character comes to him, it just naturally progresses. I don't know how much of that is bullshit and how much of it's actually true, but I'm the kind of same when I kind of write my stories as well. It's like I kind of like, I can start with a kind of idea or something, and I know the kind of tangent bits of this, that might happen. I might have an idea, and it could be the end of a story. It could be something that I have the end of. Now I have to work my way back, and I don't know where these characters are going to come from, what little traits and nuances they have. but it's also that kind of thing of how do we get from it, and how do we make? And usually, what I find, like I'm writing a book at the moment, sort of thing, where I'm finding this one character who wasn't, in my eyes, the main character, now becoming the main character, and now I'm like shit, because now I have to do this thing of like, do I now make this the main character, or actually do I make it ambiguously like Ellen Ripley, who in Alien wasn't the original main character, sort of thing. She just kind of comes into it halfway point, and she's like the bookish kind of nerdish sort of one doing it by the books, and later on she becomes the final girl. But like it's something along those lines. Like Will, do you have that kind of thing when you're writing? Do you have like a kind of preset thing of like that's going to happen, or do you think, hey, I'm going to write this chapter and we'll see how it goes, and if it goes this way, fine, if it goes that way, I'm going to go with it?
I definitely notice it when a chapter or a scene isn't working for me, and you're trying to, because normally it comes quite easily, and I can just like the scene just flows naturally based on like what the characters would do and stuff. But occasionally you can run into a stumbling block where it's like you're trying to force something that just doesn't feel quite right, and it takes a while to sometimes step back from that and say, well, what's the problem here? Why is this so difficult to write all of a sudden? And it's usually because you're trying to make your characters do something that they wouldn't normally do. They're not acting in the way that they would. It's just like you're trying to force it to make the plot happen the way you need it to happen. And that's when you need to probably just go back and rewrite the entire scene and just think, well, okay, how do I restructure this so that I can keep it consistent with what I know about these people? And that's 9 times out of 10, that solves the problem. But I think for me as well, like I don't know about you guys, I often have a lot more fun with my supporting characters than with probably my protagonists, because with the protagonist, you've got a certain responsibility to make them kind of got to be likable, and they've got to have this, that, and the other, like in order to help the audience connect with them. With the supporting characters, like people can take them or leave them. They're not on as much as the protagonist, and so you can just experiment with them a lot more and just take them to like a bit more extremes or whatever, and you end up creating perhaps more interesting people as a result. And like those are the ones I tend to have perhaps more fun with. And also when it comes to putting them in danger, everyone knows, like the reader just kind of knows, well, the main character is not going to fucking die halfway through his own book, like obviously not. So there's no point putting them in too much peril, because like it can't really go anywhere. But when it comes to the supporting characters, well, they could die at any moment because they're not protected by plot armor. And so if you can make them like likable and interesting and then put them in danger, like that ratchets up the tension brilliantly, because the audience has got no idea if they're going to make it. And so when I start killing them off, I have a great old time culling them. And people are raging about it. So
I just had this vivid image of George R. R. Martin just waving there, like just the Game of Thrones.
I mean, I'm sure other people have done it before him, but like he really exemplified the power of that when you had the things like the Red Wedding. Like nobody is safe. Brilliant. That's what you want your audience to feel like. You don't want to get them into that comfort zone where they just feel like, well, this character and that character are fine because of course the author's not going to kill them off. No, they should always be in danger.
I had that as well with the Walking Dead series to begin with, and then it got to a certain point, and then it was just like, nah. But I am enjoying Daryl Dixon at the moment, so.
Yeah, I mean, I checked out the Walking Dead universe after the Negan war arc, and because it was partly just it become really samey, partly like it was less and less about the zombies survival stuff, and it was more just about war between humans, and not particularly well done war either.
Inevitably, that's what it comes down to, isn't it, though? Because like you get through one section, like when you go to the prison, and then it's like we're doing another prison, and we're doing another prison, and it gets rinse repeat.
I swear, like, yeah, there was like a whole season practically where they must have blown all their budget on like the prison battle scenes, and it's like 5 or 6 episodes in a row where it was just like people walking through woods and nothing really happening. It's like, yeah, just like the cheapest possible way we can do this shit. And so, yeah, I think in some ways, like Walking Dead just became too much of a good thing, and I just felt like this is just not really going anywhere. It's never going to end. It's just going to be more groups that they stumble across that are going to seem good at first, and then they're going to turn out to be evil, and like, okay, rinse and repeat. So eventually I just checked out of it.
But that's what I enjoyed about Dark Harvest. Nice little segue there. In respect of what you've done with it was almost like M.R. Carey's The Girl of All the Gifts, because there is science. This isn't, and I'm not sort of saying it in like the 28 Days Later sort of thing, but there is science there, like with the cordyceps that M.R. Carey had sort of thing with The Girl of All the Gifts, and with Dark Harvest you have the same thing. Like there's this like ancient sort of like thing that's going on. But it's also set in the real life with the kind of military style actions there. Will we be seeing any more Cameron in like future installments? And will they
totally.
sort of do that kind of thing where you're taking maybe something? I don't want to say supernatural because that's not the right word. But you know what I mean, like in that world.
So what I enjoyed about this and what I love doing in storytelling is blending together the past and the present. So like with this one you had almost 3 different eras of this story. You had like the ancient sort of virus that starts off like almost in like primitive times. You have like the Dyatlov Pass incident back in the 1950s, and then you jump to the present day, but it's all tied together by this like overarching narrative. And so I like that idea of like, sometimes despite all our modern technology and all the advancements we've made, we're a little bit helpless when it comes to the face of nature and its power, and the dangers that it poses to us. And sometimes you have to like revert back a little bit in order to find the solution. So I really like that, and so I wanted to play with that a bit. I could definitely had the idea of doing more stories with a character like Cameron Becker, where again there might be other unsolved mysteries through our history, because there's like thousands of them that I can draw upon, like whether it's unexplained disappearances or like whatever.
Just going to throw out there vampires that when they tear their shirts off, the sparkles come from the chest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
beautiful stuff like that. But there's all kinds of things that I can weave into like some historical narrative and give some kind of grounding in science, and like have it influence the present day. So I think there's a lot I can play with there. I just haven't got around to doing it yet. And my attention has been kind of focused on the movie over this past year. So
So can you tell us about Rogue Elements?
Oh, it's really cool. No, I mean, we were lucky in that we had the idea for doing it back at the end of last year. And, myself and the director, we tossed around some ideas and stuff, came up with a basic outline and said, let's crowdfund it. Maybe we'll get, 10, 20 grand that'll give us enough for like some basic film equipment, and we can do like a 10-15 minute short just to see what we can do with these characters. We did it. We ended up with like £300,000, which was nice, so a lot more than we expected, and so that made it a lot more legit. We were able to hire proper actors. We massively bumped up the script. It went from like a 10-minute short to like a big 40-minute 45-minute I don't know what you'd call it. It's almost like an episode of TV or something. And there we were, like in the summer of this year, I was out in Canada, like watching all these awesome fight sequences get filmed with like proper professional Hollywood stuntmen, amazing equipment and everything just kind of aligned for us. Like the strikes that were happening this year meant that there was a whole bunch of equipment just sitting around doing nothing, and people as well. So we had like film cameras that were worth $250,000 each, that we would never have been able to rent otherwise, but like we got them for almost nothing so that we could use them on this film. And so it looks amazing. Like I was genuinely blown away when I saw the rushes and the sizzle reels and stuff that they produced. This will look like a proper movie, and it will look like it's got like 5 times the budget of what it actually did. So we made everything go a long way, and people put in a lot of time and a lot of extra hours on this. So there was a real great atmosphere on set of like people really bought into what they were doing with this. So I'm very happy with it. And unfortunately now we're in that kind of boring post-production stage where we did all the sexy like film shoots, and I got to see people thrown off buildings and stuff and get shot. And now it's just like, now they're editing. And they're doing all the VFX work, and they're doing all the sound design and all that stuff. So that takes a few months now. So We're aiming to have it ready for about January time, I should think.
Nice. What during that process did you run into and be like, oh shit, I didn't anticipate that. Like I never thought that would be an issue.
The filming schedule, for sure. Like to give you an example, right? We were filming a really cool fight scene between a character called Kira, who's like the tech specialist of the team, but she's like a little bulldog of a character who just like really gets in there when it comes to fighting, and like a big sort of almost like a henchman guy. It was taking place on the rooftop of like a warehouse, and it was all good fun until it started raining about midway through the fight. And I when I say rain, I mean like fucking heavens open. Like, you know, if you'd been in the Philippines or something, it wouldn't have been as heavy as this. I've never seen anything like this in bloody Canada of all places as well. So we couldn't do anything. It was like pouring down, like absolutely turned the rooftop into a swamp. Like it was like, you know, a foot deep. What do we do? Because my initial thought was, well, like, fine, let's just film the rest of the fight scene tomorrow when it clears up. But it's like, well, we don't have the two actors tomorrow. Because it's not like they're all just sitting around waiting, like in costume, ready for me to go.
Gotta
like,
roll with it.
I'm ready.
Got to have a dirty fight scene in the rain. Yeah.
Because, so what we had to do was we moved it indoors. We found part of the warehouse which we could move into from the rooftop. The fight choreographers worked out the rest of the fight scene on the fly with the location that we had. And it ended up probably being better than what we planned before, because instead of a boring rooftop, there was like a corridor, there was like steel pipes and everything that we could use. There was one of the characters like jumps down from higher up. Looks great. And then all we needed was a quick linking scene that we filmed like a couple of days later, tied it all together, and it looks great. You would never know that any of this stuff had happened, but like it's stuff we had to work out on the fly, and it's partly down to, you know, having a limited budget. If this had been a big, you know, $100 million movie, fine, we could wait a couple of days until things clear up and we could just do it again. We didn't have that luxury, but it forces you to be inventive, which is great.
So we should look out for that kind of Mortal Kombat sort of scene where Kano hits Liu Kang and it goes from being from one location, smashes into a house, into the other one.
Yeah, I mean, we managed to make it make more sense, at least in this thing, but yeah.
Do you have a celebratory whiskey that you save for special occasions?
I mean, special occasions, I just drink whiskey all the time now. It's like, if it ends in Y, then I'll have something, you know. Yeah, I mean, like, my favorite whiskey is probably Lagavulin, which people have asked me about before. It's a bit more expensive. It's like, I think it's about £65 a bottle or something, but it's good stuff. Really just goes down smooth. Perfect stuff. You don't have it with ice, you don't have it with water, just have it neat. Perfect.
I'm blaspheming now because I'm having mine with the old Coke Zero.
It's bells.
What?
Blended whiskies, you're fine. We can mix them with anything.
Yeah.
They're like bourbons. Yeah. They're not to be savoured. They're just there to, you know, fulfill a role, and that role is getting you pissed.
Yeah.
Is it working, Tony?
Say again.
Is it working?
Always.
Is it?
Never stops.
That's good.
Nice.
No.
It's reliable.
Yeah. But well, I mean, we know you have a busy schedule. We don't keep you too long, but we have a question we like to ask all the guests, and that is, what was your first job, and what did you learn from that experience?
The first job I ever had, it lasted about a month, and it was working for like a fledgling online company to try and get people to go into chat rooms, right, and try and get people to go to their website to like buy their shitty products. And yeah, that was my first job.
Was this like the MSN chats sort of thing, or?
Oh god, yeah. This was like 1999, maybe like 2000.
Was it always starting off ASL?
Days. Yeah. But it was funny because I was doing this job and I was like, right, boys, the future is here. I'm going on the internet, you know. But it was the company folded after like a couple of months. It was one of those ones that just died in the .com boom. But it taught me. God, what did it teach me? I don't know. Like, just because it's a new idea doesn't mean it's a good one. I suppose.
That's a good one. That's the best answer yet, Steve. My first job was to be an internet creep.
Yeah.
So that was you, huh? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in my defense, I was like 17 or 18 at the time, so I wasn't some sinister old man or anything.
Yeah.
You were Jordan Belfort. It's fine in that age.
Yeah,
you know? You did whatever people needed to do to get them to where they wanted to go. It's fine.
Yes. Well, thank you again for. I know you're really busy, so you have stuff going all the time. Really appreciate your time, and hope to do it again sometime.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. In the meantime, if someone's looking for your stuff, where can they find you or connect with you? You
can find me lurking on Twitter as The Critical Drinker, and you can find my YouTube channel under the same name. So yeah, I post every couple of days, new videos and stuff. So that's where you'll find me most of the time.
Awesome, cool. Well, thanks everyone, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. See you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. All right, catch you later.